Welcome back to ZMS Esports Studio, your home for all things virtual cycling and virtual racing. And you're joined today by me, your host Mark, as I navigate you through the new series of races brought to you by us here at ZMS Esports Studio called Chase the Yellow, taking place on the relatively new virtual indoor cycling platform IndyVelo. But speaking of racing, where will this series see us race? Well, we're going to have 4 stages in this race series, beginning today with Base Camp. And then on Thursday, 31st of August, we will have Coastal Loop. We will then follow that on the 5th of September by Locked and Loaded. And finally, rounding us out on Thursday, September 7th, we will have Crossover Circuit, all on IndyVelo's proprietary Velo Island. But we've covered the 4 stages. Let's take a closer look at stage 1 for today's race. So we did cover that it's called Base Camp, and it is 2 laps today to make just shy of 26 kilometers, 25.9 to be precise, with a cumulative elevation gain of 311 meters. If anyone from one of only 2 or 3 imperial countries around the world is watching this, how do you get that into feet where you times the meters by pretty much 3 and then you'll get the feet from that? But this is going to be a race that is going to separate the rollers from the sprinters, so the rollers being the all-rounders, people who are the jack of all trade, maybe master of none, however, who can tackle the climbing as well as the sprints. But there's a nasty pinch in that climbing, which you can probably see if you take a look at the elevation profile in the upper right window there, but we'll discuss it more as we get deeper into today's race. But now that we've taken a look at today's stage, there's something unique about Chase the Yellow on IndyVelo, and it's to do with something that is unique to IndyVelo itself, and that is the fact that pro riders, aka sanctioned riders, or those with licenses either from UCI as the international sanction and licensing body, or national and even, for example here in Canada, provincial race bodies, those riders can go into the menu options and insert their current active non-expired license details in there. Which, why do I bring that up? Well, today we will have 2 race types. We will have Sportive, which is general classification, ergo riders who are not licensed. However, we will also have a pro stage race taking place on the exact same stage that we're on today, Base Camp, and that will be for those who are sanctioned or licensed, whichever way you wish to phrase that. And we can see here on screen the racing license window where you have to insert the name of the body that gave you the license, the governing body, the governing body ID, so that would be the card or virtual card ID number, or UCI ID number if it is a worldwide license. You then insert that, and we have a form of double verification so that we can weed out the numbers between 2 points of recording numbers for the pro races. And we'll discuss that a little bit more as we get into today's race. But essentially, to boil it down, the pro riders have to be riding on a Direct Drive Smart Trainer so that numbers can be gained from power, cadence and speed. But to boil it down even further, the double verification comes in with the mandated necessity in IndyVelo and in Chase the Yellow for power meters, so that we can have dual recorded numbers that can be cross-referenced to make sure that no skewing of the numbers and no weight doping, which is one of the doping ploys that has been used on virtual cycling in many other platforms in the past, cannot happen here today. All right, before we jump on over to the course today to see our riders getting pumped up to push off of that start line, let's take a look at a recap from the prior 2 time slots. So we are on time slot 3 today, but let's take a look at who won stages 1 and 2. So here we have Rasmus Feldbard of EU Cycle Club Denmark taking the win in the Pro Series Men's in stage 1, but for Sportive or general classification, it was Daniel Carson. And then for stage 1 Sportive or general classification women, it's Vicky Whitelaw. Stage 1 slot 2 pro men, that was Josh Harris. Sportive or general classification is Walter Claus, a familiar name to myself for sure. And look at this, we have a hard-fought sprint here, but ultimately it was taken by Ariel Verhaeren for the general classification or Sportive women in time slot 2. Alright, and we are now on the start line. And we can see that we've certainly got a lot more contenders in Sportive or general classification, if you will, which is the right window on your screen today. And Pro Race, ergo the sanctioned and or licensed riders, are on the left. And we can see that we've just got a minute left. So there will be some form of verification on general classification, but it will be single recording only, so the verification is obviously a lot less scrutinized. But that dual verification is mandated, by the way, and a final measure that I didn't cover, just while I've got a few seconds here to cover that, is that race day weight measurement will need to be supplied as well before hopping on that bike, so we can verify out the weight doping that I referred to earlier as well. And we can see some familiar names here, and I'm really happy to see Igor Kopse here as well. We've got Thomas Bayan, who I believe, if memory serves, won the race yesterday, the WLVR Monday Malarkey race. And we've got Tim Humpton, who was certainly in hot contention for that, and a very familiar name to myself, Carl Axel Perzon. I'm happy to see a Canadian in the mix as well, a fellow Canuck on the Sportive side of today's race. And we're starting to see some nice bunching in the Sportive, but a breakaway there on the Pro Race. That won't last for long, I'm sure, as we get into that. And we will return to what I discussed about the little sting in the tail of the 311 meters of climbing. Doesn't sound like a lot for 26 kilometers, but there is certainly a sting to it. You would have seen it if you took a look at the elevation profile on the map screen, but you can certainly see it right now on the bottom of each window. It's kind of that ghosted gray that you can see right now on the bottom of each, and that is that it's a very sudden, from flat, climb twice, and that will separate the rolliers or the all-rounders, as I previously covered, from the sprinters. But if we have climbers in today's race, will it give them an edge to kind of come back in the flats? Time will tell. And we've got Tim Humpton here, he's breaking 300 watts, so he's certainly not holding around to get his cardio effort up. And we've got Mark Robottom here, another familiar name to myself, Carl Axel Zander Persson, the soaring Swede. And we certainly now have a bit of a bunch here going on. We can see Carl there on his webcam. I'm always humoured by the fact that Carl is putting so much into the bike that he has no base layer, no jersey, just the bib shorts. He is overheating that much. So we are now past our stage-in boundary, and we are now firmly into lap 1 of 2. But we can see a breakaway here on the Sportive side, and that is Matthew Ladd, who is breaking away. And look at that, he is dangerously close to breaking 400 watts with a cadence of 82, so certainly go in for a higher tension gear. And I'm certain in the big chain ring, really cranking through that chain tension, dragging through on the upstroke, I'm sure, of each pedal stroke. But Rob Halsall and the rest of the peloton have eaten away at that little breakaway. as we're beginning to get into a bit of a headwind here. So John Samet of Coalition, Team Coalition, taking a bit of a lead, but there's certainly going to be a lot of jockeying and jostling for that lead position as we go. Now, as we get into more of a side wind, a bit of a tailwind even, with riders being pushed along, we can see those wattage numbers dropping a little bit. And Ralph B of Watt Fabric taking the lead here. I believe one of our bigger teams in the Chase the Yellow series. But again, there's so much jockeying and jostling going on. The time it took me to explain that, we've seen Matthew Ladd once again regain that lead, regain that ground, with Daniel Magohaz right on his rear wheels. So here we have the Central European Cycling Team, or the Central Europäische Radsportgruppe, Watt Fabric or Watt Fabric, with Andre Patala, Jan Ole Kodding, Kai Retzel, Ralf Berg, Reinhold Berkey, Tobias Ostermann, and Carmen Krebs. I love that logo as well, by the way. Fantastically simple, but yet evocative logo. So, who is taking the lead in the pro race? It looks like we've got Tim Humpton there taking the lead with electricspirit.co or .co. But Razio Racing, of whom Igor Kopse is a member, is hot on the heels of Electric Spirit Co's Tim Humpton there, who we can see is complemented in this race series by Matt James and Thomas Bayen. So Razio Racing coming in for a big challenge here with Daniel Tulin. And we've got Morten Veng here. Also with electricspirit.co, it looks like. But we can see those wattage numbers beginning to plateau out. While we do have those very pinchy, very punchy climbs coming up, obviously our riders know that they have to pace. So it's interesting that you see that our pros are putting down a lower wattage number by just a little margin than the Sportive general classification. Maybe from training they know something that the rest of us do not, but they are certainly knowing where to pace and how to pace. But we can see Thomas Bayen here taking the lead for Belgium, I believe. But beginning to break away from what I was just saying there about pacing, going over 400 watts there. So really putting some fierce joules through those crank arms, really juicing out all the joules he can. Tried his best to keep the rest of almost arguably a pace line here at bay, but beginning to lose a little bit of ground. But if Thomas can do it once, he will be able to do it again, I'm sure. And we're following Andrea Heinrich here, who is looking to catch up with the little tiny bunchy that we have here, perhaps get a little bit of the draft benefit. And Indy Velo is, of course, one of the many virtual indoor cycling platforms that supports draft benefit. I really do like Indy Velo's draft benefit system and the way it works, especially on direct drive smart trainers, where it feels like it does in the real world. It makes it easier on your body. How do you simulate that indoors where you don't have air resistance? Well, that is done by the resistance that is put in through your electronic mag wheel inside of the direct drive smart trainer, easing up and easing a little bit of your resistance depending on what percentile of draft benefit you have, ergo making it feel easier on your body. So it's kind of using a different method to simulate how it feels easier on your body in the outdoor real world. And we're following M. Nyquist here, putting in 250 watts-ish just across this little tiny climb here. And we've got Kiwi Kev, who I would say, you know, big surprise that Kev is from New Zealand, given the name. But look at that, also getting to a place where pacing is happening, hovering around that 200 mark on the watts. A nice high cadence, however, so keeping those legs massaged, keeping the lactic acid from turning nice and solid in the legs. You want to keep it nice and soft, nice and fluid, and certainly keeping a nice high cadence on the flats is going to help with that. However, a nice fast cadence is also going to hit your cardio effort faster. So there is always a double-edged sword in any cardio sport, including cycling. But look at this, a real nice low wattage here, real nice high cadence, keeping everything massaged here for Clive Byam. And Trainer Jones. So we've got Trainer Jones here with ATP Oxygen. We can see that nice ATP logo there on the back of the bib shorts. And I'm loving those nice colors with the nice matching colored bar tape there. That's a fantastic look. And we have Ralph B from What Fabric or What Fabric. Keeping nice and paced on the back there, looking to catch on to the peloton ahead. But how is our pro race coming along? It looks like Tim Humpton has once again got that pole position, but again, there is hot contention for said pole position. So we just got our marker there, marking the end of a classified area, the end of a categorized sprint zone, I guess is what that would be, or climb zone. And we are on board here with Mark Rowbottom. If you watched Chase the Yellow earlier in July, you would have seen Mark Rowbottom put in some fierce effort in that race series, and I'm certain we will see him do the same here. A team member of Igor Kopse. We're on board here with Carl Axel Zanderpersen for Sweden, who is looking to catch on with the lead group there. And turning very much like myself when I'm on my bike, either indoors or outdoors, very much turning into a beetroot with the high chain tension effort that all riders will be feeling now as we're getting into the very pinchy and punchy climb. We're going upwards of 10% right now. So very pinchy, very punchy, certainly when you're looking to maintain speed and momentum, ergo in a race. And we can see here, arguably very close to 500 watts here with Daniel Tulin beginning to lose a bit of that resistant edge there, dropping sub 300. And we've got Thomas Bayan once again taking the lead. Maybe Thomas is either a roller or a climber, and we may see him put in some hot contention through the climbs in today's race. And maybe this will be his golden goose of when he can punch forward and claim the lead through the climbs. Look at that, keeping very consistent above 400 watts on the climb, knowing that if he drops that resistance or that ability to pull through the resistance, that he's going to lose that edge. And we've got Igor Kopse here, a very seasoned pro rider, breaking through to the front. And we know, again, if you watch Chase the Yellow in July, you will very much be aware that Igor is absolutely a roller. We can see that if you look on the numbers that Igor is just a little bit shy of 500 watts there with a nice cadence of 62. So it looks like the pros know that there's no such thing as it being arguably illegal to drop below 70 revolutions on the climb. They know that they can go even lower than that. Certainly I know that I can go as low as 50 before I tip over. So yeah, you've just got to keep pulling through the resistance. If you're good at pulling up through the stroke while you are clipped in, you'll be able to do pretty much any revolution through a climb. Tim Humpton using the downward trajectory, the power, the gift of gravity, if you will, to get a little bit of a lead here, but with Igor Kopse and Morten Veng hot on his rear wheel, will he be able to hold this lead? And we can see Rob Housel there is currently taking the lead in the Sportive with a hot challenge from Ludwig Karlberg. So Ludwig with BL13 and Rob Housel with Level Velo in terms of the teams that they are representing here on course. But like a missile, like a shot through the dark, we had Victor Wilking there taking in a hot contention to challenge Rob Housel and Ludwig with Team BHC. And we're on here with Daniel Kerder, also with BHC, and Sven Dreise, also with BHC once again. So now looking to close the gap that has been formed through the climb, and climbs often turn your peloton into an elastic band, but we are looking at the full flex of the stretch at that point. So they will stretch out your peloton, so we can see that Daniel was putting in a huge amount of watts there trying to catch up with that lead attack group of Rob Housel, Victor Wilkin and Ludwig Karlberg. And we can see that they have actually dropped off their wattage and relying more on gravity coming through that, I'm sure, much wished for descent of our little climb there. So Tim Humpton, Igor Kopse and Morten Veng still fighting it out here for the lead. But coming in hot is Thomas Bayen, letting our three contenders here know that he is very much not out for the count yet. But Tim Humpton is holding on something fierce. Much like in other virtual cycling platforms, here on Indy Velo, the animation of the avatar of any given rider, the animation of the cadence, so long as you have something that records cadence into the game, whether that is an external cell battery powered cadence meter or the inbuilt baked in cadence meter of a smart trainer, it will actually give the direct numbers into the game, which will influence the animation of cadence. So you can kind of follow along even without seeing the numbers on any given rider, just by looking at the animation of any given rider. So we have Ludwig Karlberg here on the Sportive or general classification, whichever way you wish to phrase that, taking the lead. And look at that, just tipping 400 watts with a nice low cadence, so really dragging through the chain tension, finding the place where he is optimal in terms of power input versus power output. But as soon as I say that, we have got Rob Housel there just charging ahead. And he is gunning it, hitting 500, breaking 500 watts, getting into a kind of nice fast cadence there, breaking 90. And beginning to form a breakaway here. Getting an arguably dangerous lead, knowing that we're coming into the flats again. But this is where we might see the sprinters be able to forge a path ahead to maybe usurp Rob. We can see Victor Wilkin there in that second place position, just being passed by Ludwig and Ludwig's rival, Central European rival there, Sven Dreise. Thank you, Christoph, for your wonderful comment there. Christoph Contant, who is a familiar name to anybody who rides in the OTR races. And I should mention that today's race has been organized and put together by OTR Virtual Events. So we wish to thank you at OTR And send a thank you to the ringleader of OTR, James Ogilvie. And we can still see this three-man breakaway in the pro race. So we've got Tim Humpton, Thomas Bayan and Morten Fang all currently fighting for that lead position, which is currently taken by Tim Humpton. But we've seen Tim be pushed back in the spearhead, if you will, of this little breakaway before. Igor Kopse very much in the mix here as well for Slovenia and Rezio Racing. But it's almost entirely rounded out today by ElectricSpirit.co, who is Thomas Bayan, Matt James and Tim Humpton. And wonderful photos of all team members in their cycling kits there. Thomas Bayan here taking the lead, breaking 400, arguably nearly tipping 500 at points here. A nice kind of mid-range cadence there, so keeping a nice mid-tension gear, one would assume, in the big chainring. But Rob Housel has got a breakaway here, and I'm wondering what happened while we were taking a look at the pro race for him to get such a fierce breakaway. That was a breakaway before, but we could still very much see other contenders looming on the rear wheel. But he's managed to hold a nice high wattage, considering that we're relatively flat here, arguably slightly downhill. So Rob Housel is being chased by Ludwig Karlberg, Sven Dresser and Victor Wilking. And our arch here denotes the end of a lap as we are about to crest into lap 2 as our riders leave it all on the bikes and leave the rubber on the tarmac. Thomas Bayan managing to hold his contenders at bay here in the pro side of the race, and we can see that the pro side of the race is slightly ahead of the Sportive. So if you look at the top center of your screen, in that little bar that you have there where you have the checkered finish line flag, in the middle there you can see that it says 11.7 kilometers or 11.6 now. That is the distance cumulative remaining. And then on the right of that bar we have the time counting up. So time since we rolled over the start line there at the beginning. And there's slightly less distance remaining on the pro side of the race, and so we can see that the pro riders are really bringing the heat today, such as Igor Kopse, who just broke the lead there, only to be usurped mere tenths of a second later. So Tim Humpton taking the lead for Electric Spirit Co today. Or right now, there's going to be a lot of usurpment, a lot of jockeying and jostling for that lead. And I can certainly say that I am very much certain of that today. So, as a reminder of the course that we are on today, we are on Indy Velo's proprietary Velo Island with base camp 25.9 kilometers cumulative, which is formed by 2 laps with 311 meters of climbing, so roughly 920 to 930 feet of climbing. So we have Rob Housel on the Sportive side of the race, who is managing to actually get that distance remaining down to a distance that is almost competitive against the pro side of the race here. So Rob is certainly bringing some ferocity through those crank arms today, through the chain, through the drivetrain. But we can see the little pip on the horizon there of Ludwig Karlberg, who is bringing some serious fire to catch up to Rob. And he is becoming more than a pip on the distance now. Arguably, his looming shadow of his front wheel will be cast over that of Rob Halsel's rear wheel in mere seconds now. And it looks like 9 seconds behind, we've got Sven Dreze. But on the pro side of the race, it looks like Tim has opened up a little breakaway again. But I have been led into a false sense of security of this breakaway before, only for Igor Kopse and Morten Feng to be able to eat away at said breakaway with ease. And as I say that, Ludwig Karlberg has taken that lead from Rob Halsall, slingshotting beyond him. But Rob Halsall is not going to give up without a fight here. And again, keeping a nice mid-range cadence here is Ludwig, around about that 70 to 80 mark, keeping the tension fairly high but not too high. I am excited by the jostling for that lead position there in the sportive side of the race. I'm sure we're going to see a very exciting, very edge of your seat sprint to the finish line as we get towards the end here. And yeah, I feel you, Carl. I can see the effort you're putting into that. I can see the mental taxation as you put it all into the bike. So Carl there is in the 8th place position with Electric Spirit Co. And we've got Igor Kopse taking the lead right now, but by barely a bicycle length. Tim Humpton hot on his wheels. And Rob Halsall's got that lead again, but we can see that contention there being placed by Ludwig, who is not going to let go of his locked on, almost Terminator vision of Rob's rear wheel. Yeah, exactly, Carla. Let's go, riders. Put it all into the bikes, leave it all on the tarmac. And please give me some very, very exciting finish line sprints to comment on. Christopher Schwenker, thank you for your lovely comment. Yeah, that climb is a beast, Christopher. I couldn't agree more if I tried. It comes out of nowhere from the flats into a very sharp climb. And certainly we've seen that dissipate the peloton that we did have on the Sportive side. However, on the pro side, while it has dissipated the main group, we've seen that attack group, that breakaway group, manage to hold on very fierce to each other's rear wheels as they've continued on, and that's been through the climbs, through the descents, through the flats. So we have got a small bunch of equally competitive rolliers here, it would appear. And Tim Humpton is not going to let go of that fierce battle with Igor Kopse and Morten Feng. And so we are today taking on Basecamp, but on Thursday 31st of August we'll have Coastal Loop 32.9 kilometers with an awful lot less climbing, and stage 3 will be September 5th, and that will be 25.1 for Locked and Loaded. But coming in at the biggie at 44.3 kilometers will be Crossover Circuit on September 7th. So join us for those. You can watch live on Facebook by searching ZMS Esports Studio. You can watch live on YouTube by searching ZMS Live Stream. Or you can watch on any smart device by downloading the ESTV app and searching ZOS Esports Studio, or searching IndieVelo, or searching Chase the Yellow. Any one of those will work on ESTV. Alex Plager is joining us here from Razio Racing, and we can see that he's putting in some hot contention here on the Sportive side of things, looking to catch up with the rest of the group further down. Alex is a fierce rider out of Deutschland, Germany, and is a very, very competent climber. So Victor Wilking, we can see his numbers here. Well, I think he's a little bit ahead of us here, but we just saw him crack 600 before dropping back down into the 300s. So above the peloton is reforming in the Sportive. So we might be able to see somebody use the kind of micro rest, if you will, of the, considering that we're coming back into this very pinchy, very punchy climb, the micro rest that's provided by the draft benefit to be able to slingshot ahead and put in some hot contention to Ludwig and Rob here. And certainly they've managed to make up a lot of ground to not be that far behind Rob and Ludwig anymore. And we are only about a third of the way through this climb. We have a little plateau here before we get back into a very, almost offensively painful climb. So 0.4 of a kilometer ahead is the lead of the pro race, and Igor Kopse has got the lead here. We're currently on board with Thomas Bayan, but it looks like Igor is punched right ahead. Thomas has unfortunately fallen behind a little bit, but we can just about, if you look at those trees ahead, you could just about see them on the horizon there. So Thomas is not far behind. If he can hold his own through the chain tension, through the resistance of this climb, he will be able to catch the rear wheels there of Morten Feng, Tim Humpton and Igor Kopse. Igor there easily punching 500 watts as he continues towards the zenith of today's climb. Just over 5 kilometers remaining on the pro side of the race. Igor getting a bit of an edge here. He has found the point, the limit of the Rollier ability of his fellow contenders there, and I certainly know from having watched Igor before that he is very competent at the climbing side of being a Rollier, as well as being able to hold his own for a bit of a sprint too. But certainly climbing is where he really brings the power. And he's certainly beginning to open that up, use that ability to its fullest, and open up that breakaway there. Morten Feng now really trying to push into the downhill here to gain that ground, knowing that that's going to elasticize further with the momentum that Igor has built up. But will Morten be able to do it? Well, while we ponder that question, friends, why don't we jump on over to the Sportive or General Class. So we've got Rob Housel here, got a bit of a breakaway again, still pushing through the climb, but showing us that he is also a fierce climber is Ludwig Karlberg, who is using this time to really hone in on that rear wheel of Rob. There we go, look at that, punching 500 watts there. Keeping above 60 on the cadence, so really pulling through that chain tension, really pulling up on the upstroke of the pedal strokes, and really crunching his way through those crank arms. Certainly in the real world, this would be a race where afterwards you'd want to check that tyre pressure on the rear wheel, just by the displacement of weight that would be rocked towards the center and center back on those very fierce climbs. And we are on board here with Sven Dreze from BHC, punching 400 watts there, keeping around about 70, so doing really good effort here on the cadence as much as on the wattage. Keeping a nice good heart rate, 162. I don't know Sven's age, and maximal heart rate is very much dependent on age. For example, I am just about touching 37, and my maximal would be about 185. But it seems like maybe around about zone 4 there for Sven. At a somewhat educated guess. Igor here, look at that breakaway. He has made a fine art piece out of that breakaway. Serenely unobstructed by other riders, other contenders. And we've got Morten Feng and Tim Humpton here, sticking pretty much shoulder to shoulder as they are trying to chase down Igor. I believe we can just about see him there in the far distance of the horizon. There's a little blip, on the horizon, and we have Thomas Bayen here. Unfortunately for Thomas, I think maybe he found his limit of how much he can push those quads through that chain tension at just about the wrong moment, the least opportune moment. And I was hoping to see Thomas come in here for a nice strong contention on that breakaway group, but maybe today is not the day. But that certainly does not mean that Thomas is out for the count, as we'll get to see him put in some fierce contention, I'm sure, in the remaining 3 races of Chase the Yellow. We're on board here with Mark Rowbottom, and we have Carl Axel Zander Persson as well, who we saw on webcam earlier. And they are looking to keep very strong, and one would assume that their mental thought process right now is to keep strong for a good position in the table for today's race. And look at Carl here, we're on a relative flat, and he is keeping a high tension, a cadence that is reflective of a high tension gear in the big chainring. So he's looking at keeping the wattage high and the optimal transference of power, and I guess hoping that he doesn't cook the quads so that he doesn't lose that optimal transfer of power. That is the risk with going that route with a low cadence, high power. So Rob Halsall taking that lead once again, but again, Ludwig is hot on those heels. It almost looks like Ludwig could pass right now, but he's holding back. And I believe he might be holding back with this climb to get a little bit of micro rest, but also so that he can wait out the correct moment, pace himself as mirroring the pace of Rob, and then maybe keep that pace and that equal distance there right up until when he can put in a finish line sprint. Bearing in mind that on the pro side of the race, we've just gone sub 1k. We do not have a Flamme Rouge or the 1 kilometer remaining demarcation in this race, but they have just gone sub 1k, and there's about 2.5k's remaining on the Sportive or general classification side of the race. Igor still just flying here. It looks like Tim Humpton, the closest contender, is 22 seconds behind. So the size of that lead that Igor has opened up is absolutely phenomenal. Nothing short of impressive. Tim Humpton and Morten Feng, they might even be able to use each other to slingshot from the draft benefit, but with only 300 meters remaining, it's fair to say that it is ostensibly far too late. 200 meters. So is Igor even going to need to do a finish line sprint? Maybe just for the prowess of saying that he got the finest numbers possible in today's race, but he might just hold strong, keep the cadence where it is, keep the wattage where it is, and just crossed over that finish line. Certainly nothing to be sniffed at either way. Tim Humpton beginning to break away here. And this is where we're seeing a finish line sprint. Morten Feng maybe a little bit cooked, isn't doing a finish line sprint. But either way, what a phenomenal effort there. So Thomas Payen. What a phenomenal effort from Thomas. And again, I've used this turn of phrase a few times now. Nothing to be sniffed at anybody's effort out on course today. Certainly, until you've done a race either virtual or out in the real world, you have no idea how fierce and how difficult it can actually be. And actually knowing how to pace yourself in a race is incredibly hard. And I mean incredibly hard. Arguably, the reason why it's so difficult to know how to pace yourself out in the real world or in a virtual race as well is you get tunnel vision on the racer ahead, and then you just begin to gun it and cook yourself too fast until you learn how to do it. But that tunnel vision will always begin to take over, always creep in. So it is neck and neck now between Rob House and Ludwig Karlberg, and it looks like they're actually kind of goading each other, and that they're waiting to see who's going to go for the finish line sprint first and really try to outgun each other. But it looks like maybe this is Rob's right now, but Ludwig is so close on that chase. Oh wow, there was barely a bicycle length in that, but Rob did claim it, barely that bicycle length over Ludwig. And we have Sven Dreser here. Thomas is being paced now. I think maybe Thomas, like I say, I think unfortunately maybe punched it a bit hard on those very aggressive climbs. And I think he's needed the rest a little bit earlier. But again, Thomas, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And who have we got here on the sportive side? That neck and neck push for the finish line. We had Daniel Kerder. Alex Plager closing in on that finish line as well. So just over 200 meters left for Alex Plager. And just over 400 left for Daniel Thulen. Wonderful effort, Alex. And we have Kai Retzel. A bit of a sprint, a bit of a dash for the finish line here from John. And there we go. The point where you can take that rest, my friend. Stand up out of the saddle, unclip, step down onto the tarmac, and take that nice deep breath. And Daniel there crossing the finish line. There we go. We've got Daniel Magalhaes. And that's right, our next race will be for Stage 2, which takes place on 31st of August, this Thursday, and that is the Coastal Loop, once again here on Velo Island in Indy Velo. And Daniel Magalhaes crossing the finish line there with ease and cresting to a stop. and Reinhold Berkey from Watt Fabric. I believe there's about 2 or so Central European countries represented there. From the names, it looks like there is Denmark and Germany represented by Watt Fabric. There may also be the close friend to both nations, the Czech Republic, but I'm not certain. Kenneth Richardson here. So we can see a couple of riders coming in for that finish line sprint, but it looks like Kenneth has managed to open a nice little breakaway there. He's like an arrow slicing through the air as he crests that finish line. And JL Wright with Team AEO. Closing in on that finish line. Right here on this picturesque coast of Vilo Island. Alright, so Igor Kopse took the lead today. 37 minutes, 8 seconds, and 500th of a second. So certainly setting the standard, setting the precedent for the time today for Razio Racing. Followed by Tim Humpton of the USA. He is 15.8 hundredths of a second behind Igor Kopse. And then we have the third place position, Morten Feng, at 17 seconds and almost 800th of a second behind Igor. Thomas Bayen for Belgium at 1 minute 45 and 600th of a second behind for that fourth place. And rounding out the top 5 is Matt James, 1 minute and 55 seconds behind Igor. So that's from the pro side of the race. Well, what do we have from the Sportive? Well, Rob Halsall for the UK, setting the precedent for the time on the Sportive or general classification side for level velo with 39 minutes 1 second and almost 400th of a second. Hot on the heels of Britain's Rob Halsall, however, is Sweden's Ludwig Karlberg, barely 300th of a second behind Rob. For the third place position for Deutschland is Sven Dreser for BHC, 36 seconds and 300th of a second behind Rob Halsall. Grant Womack, because that would be English, the UK, is 46 seconds and 700th of a second behind for BL13. And rounding out the top 5, Daniel Kehrer for BHC is 46 seconds and only 200th of a second behind Grant for BHC. So that is a look at our top 5 for both Pro and Sportive from today's race. But to see the full GC, come back to us on the race 2, or stage 2, sorry, on Thursday 31st of August, where we take on Coastal Loop, which will be 32.9 kilometers. As we begin the broadcast, we'll take a look at the GC, amalgamated from all 3 time slots, including today's, which was time slot number 3, to see who were top place contenders and who has to bring a bit more heat going into stage 2. Well, thank you for joining me, my friends. It's been a privilege to bring you this live commentary today. My name has been Mark. You've been a wonderful audience. Now please have a wonderful day.